This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you are encouraged to like and share them on Facebook because it's time for Issues and Answers in St. Lucie County, a show so big it requires two hosts. And tonight we've got Michael Loeb and Marg Gotz.
Well, thank you, Cliff.
Thank you, Cliff.
That's that big.
Now that you put Michael ahead of me in the show, I really appreciate that.
Well,
I get my turn. That's all.
Listen, he's probably.
but you're transposed. You're backwards in the picture.
Okay.
Well, that's true. That's true. Well, actually, I'm really happy to be here tonight because I almost got lost. I forgot what floor we broadcast from in the WPSL tower.
Oh, you got lost in the elevator.
Yes, I did. What floor do we normally? Is this the normal floor?
This is the 43rd floor.
43rd floor?
Yeah.
Really?
Which studio were you looking for?
Well, I think we'll just have to agree to disagree because I'm pretty sure we're on the 32nd. But okay.
Well, good thing you came to this one. So how you been?
Well, fine. This is an interesting way to start the show, but I think we've got a few subjects this evening. One of them in local news that Michael's going to give us a little intro on.
Oh, yeah.
Is this situation in education about having minimum grades.
It's always about education. Port St. Lucie, once again, making the national headlines. If you Google Port St. Lucie teacher fired, and then just write fired 0 grade, okay, you will see newspaper headlines or internet headlines from across the country, as New York Post all the way out to the LA Times. What seems to have happened is a teacher, I believe her name is Diane Tirado, I believe she's a social studies teacher, gave an assignment to her, I think it was 8th grade class over at Westgate. And once again, I'm not fully versed on the facts, but in terms of the actual details, gave out an assignment. Some students did not hand back the assignment, and she was going to give them a 0. Well-deserved 0. Wouldn't you say that, Mark?
Absolutely. No show, no dough.
No show, no dough. However, the rule in the school is no grade lower than 50%.
Now, wait. Let me get this straight. So you're saying that no grade can be less than 50%, and that's a policy of that school, or is this a policy of the district?
It's written in the written in the student-parent handbook. That's what I understand.
That's interesting. I wonder where they came up with 50%.
I don't know, but we just had an election where the sitting school board members, who were all reelected, went around
touting graduation rates.
Graduation
Absolutely.
rates.
We're 90% above in our graduation rate.
Just a few years ago, we were about 70%, 75%, 77%.
Right. And now we're one of the top 3 in the state, I believe. I mean, we pushed out Lucie County and a few other counties around here that have done real well over the years.
Now, they couldn't answer why we shot up the way we did, but I think we've uncovered why. If you can do absolutely nothing and get 50%, then I imagine that basically handing in a piece of paper with your name on it just brings you up to 60. And if you answer 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, maybe that gets you up to a 70. And I believe, a 70 is a D?
I believe so. Last time I checked grades, which was many years ago.
So basically, for rolling out of bed, you can pass school here in Port St. Lucie County. Now, if I sound angry, I apologize, because I am.
Well, it's interesting that, we have this great graduation rate, and one of the biggest indicators of graduation and how well students are going to do in the future is 3rd grade reading scores. And if you look at the 3rd grade reading scores in the county, you'll find that the proficiency level, which is a 3 grade in the county, but proficiency in reading, only 47% of our students are proficient in reading in 3rd grade. And that does not translate into a 90% graduation rate. So I guess my question is, are we giving these students diplomas for showing up?
Basically. My question is, are we doing them a favor? are we helping them matriculate into real life by just pushing them along and saying, don't worry about it, you'll be fine? Because the answer is no, you won't
be fine. Absolutely not. If you can't read, write, and count, you have a problem in today's society.
Now, I've got a challenge out there. Maybe it's an idea. Maybe I shouldn't challenge it. Maybe Cliff needs to read that thing about the opinions expressed on this show, not necessarily those of WPSL. But if you know a teacher that works in this school, if you know a member of the school board, if you're a waiter or your waitress and you recognize that you're waiting on them, and they give you a food order, what I suggest you do is bring them nothing. Bring them nothing except a check for 50% of what the full bill would have done. Because it's quite obvious that doing nothing gets you 50%. And I'm actually shocked that the phones are not exploding right now because the people of St. Lucie County, people of Port St. Lucie, should be up in arms over this. Matter of fact, the teachers had a press conference defending
the district?
No,
defending her?
No, not defending the teacher, defending the policy.
Defending the policy.
Defending the policy.
50%.
And you know what the reason they say is? Not enough funding. Somehow not enough fund. They don't have enough funding to teach responsibility and respect in the schools here in Port St. Lucie or St. Lucie County altogether. Okay? I hold the school board accountable. There should be an Amber Alert because they've stolen the futures of our children.
Now, what happened to this teacher?
I believe she got fired.
She got fired because she gave students a 0 instead of 50%.
She did not follow the rules. So a teacher that doesn't follow the rules gets fired. Children that don't follow the rules, they get 50%.
Well, I hope that we'll open up the phones early this evening. Anyone who would like to discuss this subject of education here in St. Lucie County and this particular subject or anything that has to do with education in St. Lucie County, the number is 340-1590.
And if you're in your cars, pull over. Wherever you are, pull over. You need to get on the phone. We need to discuss this. We need to get out into the streets. We need to make some changes here in St. Lucie.
And pulling over makes you safe. We don't want you on the phone trying to do that while you're driving. That's not a safe way to go.
Absolutely. Just thinking about this made me a bad driver. Not necessarily talking about it.
And we want all of our radio patrons safe and secure.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we want you coming back next week to listen to us as well.
You know, this situation with education, which has been going on for 50 or 60 years, is amazing because we just keep the education rate for high schoolers just keeps declining at a 45-degree rate. And I just don't know how far we have to go to get to bottom if we're not already there. And if this is the situation, I mean, you talked about, they say that there's not enough funding.
Well, there's always not enough funding.
Well, of course. I mean, this is like building a house when you're talking the school district. You just got to keep plucking money down there, throwing it in the hole while you're building a house. Speaking of building houses, I mean, didn't the school district spend $27 million on the new property that they're building over there at PGA from ground up? They bought a piece of property and they're building a building.
Right. Took it off the tax rolls, I believe.
Took it off the tax rolls. That certainly helps us taxpayers here in St. Lucie County. But
they'll tell you they got all that money from insurance.
Which would be hard to believe because I can't imagine that place that they were in was worth $27 million. If they paid that for for being part of Orange Blossom Mall, they really need to have their people in finance take another look at things. But governments in general never spend money wisely.
No, they don't.
They spend it on passionate items. They spend it on things that do not affect the citizens directly. The main thing of government, as I always like to say, is security and infrastructure. So they should provide safety through the police, EMS, fire, rescue, and they should make sure that we have clean water, clean air, and good roads to drive on, which gets us back to the half-cent sales tax.
Right. Now, what you're probably alluding to is that government makes horrible decisions when it comes to real estate development. And we here in this county have been witness to some horrible, horrible decisions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the city of Port St. Lucie has got their 3 tombstones out there that are quite interesting. Plus, they've got the one out east, which is the Civic Center property, which has gotten a little bit of movement this week.
Which is shocking.
Well, yes, it is, but it has been in a situation of being in a bankruptcy filing by Lily Zong, who purchased the property several years back. Gosh, I guess about 14 or 15, maybe 13. She purchased the property.
Interestingly enough, she purchased the property while there were tax liens on it. I guess she purchased, as you say, the entity, and the property came along with the entity as an asset. But unfortunately, the asset had taxes due on it.
And what's interesting is, yes, she did have to purchase the entity that owned the property, and she had to go to the bank. And I forget which bank it was.
Might have been PNC.
You think it was PNC? Had to go to the bank and basically get an approval to purchase the entity for the amount that she was paying, because that entity had a large loan outstanding on the property. I mean, the developer was developing the property, and there were a lot of bank liabilities in there. So I'm just wondering, I think it was about $13 million, if I remember correctly. But Ms. Zahn was able to get the property, so they say, for $500,000, or buy it through the entity, let's put it that way, and retain ownership and then transfer it to another entity, which she owned. And, of course, she never paid the taxes then.
No.
And what was interesting is, I believe you did the research on the bond, didn't you?
Yes.
That noted that if taxes are not paid for 2 years...
Well, that's the end of the story.
That's the end of the story. So we'll go back to the beginning of the story.
There's a lot of pavement and a lot of things to pave on the way into the story. And maybe we should ask Cliff when the next break is coming up.
The next break?
Well, the first break.
Oh,
first break.
You know, from our valued commercial.
Oh yes, supporters. Yes, wonderful.
Yes, absolutely.
Issues and answers in St. Lucie County. Stuff that's happening right here, right now. 340-1590 gets you on to chime. Oh, when are you going to be taking calls? Second half or
anytime?
Anytime now is all right. Okay, you
We're
like
ready
what you
for
hear? You like what you hear? You don't like what you hear? Give us a call anyway. 340-1590. We'll be right back.
If as a woman you believe that you can accomplish all that a man can accomplish and more without the help of the government, you just might be a Republican. If you believe that you should have a say in your child's education and that you should have a choice as to where your child is educated, you just might be a Republican. To learn more, go to stluciegop.org and click on Being a Republican.
St. James Christian Academy is fully accredited and is now enrolling for fall, preschool through 12th grade, providing students with excellent education in a safe Christian environment for over 17 years. They offer dual enrollment, a BECA curriculum, transportation, affordable aftercare, STEM classes, sports, dance, and karate. St. James Christian Academy is now accepting fall enrollment applications. Plus, ask about their free tuition scholarships. Be a part of the excitement. Schedule a tour today or visit us at stjameschristianacademy.com.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return to Issues and Answers in St. Lucie County with Marg, Gotz, and Michael Loeb. Said it in order this time.
Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate that. And
Thank you, Cliff.
even with that entry, I'm going to let Mike take over and give us some of the background of the city center property, which is, by the way, something that the taxpayers have been paying about, I want to say, $3.2 million a year to keep the special assessment district bond valid.
Yep.
So give us some background.
Okay, a little bit of background. Now, most of us that own property pay our taxes when they're due. If you have a mortgage, there's a good chance that you pay it a little bit every month, and then the bank pays it out of their escrow. But when a property owner doesn't pay his or her taxes, the county's tax collector convenes what's known as a tax certificate sale. Now, you might have noticed the extra phone book that comes delivered with your local paper, for those of you that still get the local paper. But every once in a while, the paper will be about 4 or 5 times as thick. And contained inside there are a list of tax certificates or properties where the taxes haven't been paid. Now, the public can purchase tax certificates via a bidding system that starts at 18%. You bid by stating the lowest interest rate you'd be willing to accept in return for paying off somebody else's taxes.
And let me interrupt you here for just a second. This is something that a lot of sovereign debt entities come in and buy up. They'll buy up all the excess tax certificates and usually bid them at 18%, sometimes actually lower, just to get their money invested in these things. So tax certificates are a very interesting instrument simply because they are guaranteed by the government. One of the few things that the government is backstopping when it comes to collecting their real estate taxes. So go ahead.
Thank you. Now, if you put in the winning bid, you get a tax certificate, and when the owner finally pays their taxes, either in the normal course of life or upon sale, they have to pay you back the taxes that you've paid plus the interest that you've earned on that tax certificate. Meanwhile, all the taxing authorities, the county, the city, the jail, the fire district, even the guy that sprays for mosquitoes, and of course the schools, they get their taxes. They don't care where the tax money comes from, just as long as the revenue comes in. I can pay it because I own a property. Mark can pay the taxes due on my property and then take back a certificate, and once I pay the taxes, I have to pay him what he paid into it plus the interest. So that's how pretty much that works. Now, there are tax certificates that don't get sold. Okay? Now, the tax collector can't keep them on his books. What they do is they get moved over to the county, and the county takes them at a full 18%. Now, the county doesn't pay for them. They just get them on their account. It's an accounting entry, and they get to earn 18% on those tax certificates. Now, the beauty of having a tax certificate, if Mark purchases a tax certificate on my property, because I haven't paid taxes, after 2 years he can force a sale. It's called a tax sale, and the property goes to auction. So basically, I either put up or I shut up, and I can easily lose my property if I don't pay off that tax certificate plus the interest.
And it's known as a tax deed sale, and it's interesting from the standpoint that it wipes out all previous indentures or loans or anything else that may be on the property. The only thing that continues on the property are government liens, and that would be for taxes or special assessments. So once the hammer goes down on a tax deed sale, that property is basically free and clear except for whatever is owed to the government.
So speeding along, we have a piece of property known as the Civic Center, or actually the area surrounding the Civic Center known as City Center, or what the city likes to be known as City Center, that has never had any taxes paid on it. The county, St. Lucie County, owns probably about 97%, would you say?
No, actually, the way it's structured on that particular 21 acres, which is the property that surrounds the city center property, or the Civic Center, I should say. It's known as the city center property. It's 21 acres, and that property is actually 3/4 of the tax bill. So county, city, fire district, all those others.
No, what I was talking about is the number of tax certificates that the county has is probably about 97% of the outstanding on that property.
Oh, on that property, yes, because no one has paid taxes on that property since 2007.
So it's a risky investment.
Well, right now, and this was in your voice. I'll give them a little heads up here. For years, this city center property has sat vacant. So now they've found a developer that they're touting that is talking about purchasing these 21 acres at US 1 and Walton Road. That's a city center property. David Garfinkel of Hollywood, Florida-based Biscayne Atlantic has received the Securities and Exchange Commission's blessing to purchase the property for $750,000. Now, the land is valued at more than $5 million. So on the surface, this sounds like a terrific deal. However, according to court records, the developer would be required to pay all back taxes and assessments on the property, which would increase the overall price tag considerably, which is what Michael has just outlined in his previous comments. In all, an estimated $24 million in back taxes and assessments have accrued on the property. Now, obviously, if the developer's going to come in and develop something, he's going to try to cut some type of deal with the city and the county to reduce that $24 million because having spent some time in the development business, I would find it very interesting for a smart developer to come in and buy a $5 million property for $24 million. They just don't normally do that unless they know there's some gold or oil or something under there that nobody else knows. Obviously, if you buy it for $750,000 on a $5 million piece of property, I know a lot of developers that'll line up for that. But then comes the situation of these outstanding taxes. If you've got $24 million in a tax sale, they don't go away because this is all government issued debt. And basically, anybody who takes this on is in a position they might buy it for $750,000. But at this point in time, because the tax deed sale was in process when the Securities and Exchange Commission closed in on Lily Zong, which was a situation that probably forced that to happen, the county was in the process of creating a tax deed sale.
Yes.
Now, I'm not sure
Usually.
anybody's going to bid $24 million for 21 acres at that corner, but that tax deed sale should continue as soon as this comes out of the SEC. So it's kind of interesting that this is happening, and like I say, it's that would be the process as I know it.
Well,
because the veil's lifted
This
once it
would-
comes out of the SEC.
this would not be the first time government bent the rules when it came to bankruptcy, and I go back to General Motors and Chrysler. But once again, that was
That was a
completely different.
prepackaged bankruptcy, which I had never heard of before.
Well, I've heard of them, but you pushed actual bondholders out of the way who got
That's
nothing.
correct.
In favor of stockholders and employees of the company, which was absolutely unheard of. The dollars here really just don't make any sense. The problem is the SAD, and maybe we can explain a little bit of what an SAD is. If you like, I can.
A special assessment district?
Special
Assessment district is something put on by the governing entity, in this case it's the city of Port St. Lucie, as a payment for bonds. As a matter of fact, we've got something similar to this happening with the 1,240 acres or so that are over there in Tradition, where the developer of Tradition basically walked away and gave the city the 1,200 acres and said, have a nice day. This is something similar to it. In this respect, you've got this $24 million elephant on top of this property, which is going to keep most developers away from it unless they can go horizontal about 50 floors. You just very, very difficult to make the dollars work on this at $1 million an acre.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be a deal cut with the city. But actually, Mike, I think if the city was smart, they wouldn't cut a deal. They would let it go into a tax deed sale of which nobody would bid. Now, what happens when nobody bids on a tax deed sale?
I imagine that the property would go back to the city.
Well, actually, it
to the
would go
county.
back to the county, and then the county would hold it for a period of time, and then they could deed it back, actually, to the city. And if there's any dollars transferred in between there for the outstanding taxes that are due to the county, for all of the other things other than the SAD, then that potentially could be worked out. But let's say that the city negotiates a deal with the county
the issue that stands in the way of the sale of the property to anyone, to any developer, okay, regardless of what they want to develop there, is the outrageous SAD. Now, I've got in front of me, and I'll hold it up so everybody watching on radio can see. Oh, by the way, it'll be on YouTube, okay? But anyway, you can get this from St. Lucie County tax collector. It's public record. But I have here a tax bill 2017 for only one of the many parcels there. Now, you have ad valorem taxes of about $5,200. You have non-ad valorem taxes of about $600. So figure about $5,800, $5,900 in taxes. Then you have your special assessment district, $42,700. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, $42,700.
So basically about 85% of that tax bill is the special assessment district.
Yeah. And this particular parcel has back taxes due on it of $750,000.
How big is this parcel?
This single parcel itself. How big is the parcel?
Let me see. It should be on there somewhere.
Ben, I don't have the full bill or the full card. Oh, it should be here. That's a good question. I don't have the full bill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the issue itself is the SAD. Now, an SAD, Special Assessment District, is set up to tax or create a surcharge so that the principal and the interest on the bonds can be paid. Now, the principal and the interest on the bonds that were taken out for the city center have been paid all along. It's been paid since, I believe, since the bond initially was issued in 2006.
Well, who's been paying those taxes, Mike?
Well, the city of Port St. Lucie has been paying those taxes, been paying taxes out of the utility tax. So the bondholders have always been kept whole, so to speak. They've received their principal and interest, principal pay down as scheduled. And, you know, as far as they know, the bonds are good. The bond collateral actually is supposed to be the Special Assessment District. What I believe, or what I think should happen, is that we retire the SAD. Tell the bondholders, and you put it to a vote of the bondholder. Usually it's called a consent offering. Usually they go through pretty easily. You say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take the collateral, going to take it from the SAD, which has never been paid, so actually that collateral is pretty bad, and we're going to exchange it for the collateral of the utility tax. Utility tax in a city like Port St. Lucie is very good. Mm-hmm. So you're really giving the bondholder the benefit. What you're doing for the bondholder is really nothing because you're doing it anyway. Okay, you've always paid it out of the utility tax. But what you're doing by freeing up the property,
SAD is allowing now somebody to come in and develop.
The SAD is you're allowing somebody to come in and actually develop the property. This way they don't buy a single parcel and have to pay $42,000 a year. Plus, of course, they'll improve the land so the initial ad valorem will go up. Plus the $750,000 that's due on it. There's got to be some give and take because right now all we have out there is probably the most expensive parking lot in Florida, if not the nation. Okay, and basically doing anything, generating any kind of job, any kind of economic transactions which generate sales tax, jobs, economy.
Ad valorem tax?
Ad valorem tax is a step up from where we are.
Sure.
Matter of fact, I once told, well, I don't want to get into it now, but the question is, who buys it and what do they develop?
Well, I think what the city's working on is they want to see what the development plans are prior to anything else. And the projects that Garfinkel's done in South Florida have basically been hotels, apartments, and retail, which would all go great there. But I remember the city spending about $50,000 on a study to study the corridor to try to identify what would go well on any of those parcels, not all of them, but just any of them. And the study came back and gave an outline of the office space in the area, the retail space in the area and the occupancy levels, medical space in the area, other types of space in the area. And then when it got to the point in time, okay, what do you think would go well and help the community and be successful on the city center property, there was a lot of dead air.
Yeah, you got nothing.
It's a difficult corridor. You know, it's cut off by bridges, and of course the crosstown bridge is going to open up a little bit of that. But still, you've got a isolated piece of property. So
it's an isolated piece of property. It's not a fly-in convention center. It's a drive-to convention center. As a structure, as it's built, and the rooms the way it's set up, even the largest room in terms of square footage isn't that large. So, you know, when it comes to bringing in conventions and, you know, things like that, the smaller ones, they have no problem with. Our good buddy Mike Milady has one of the largest
right.
conventions there.
Basically
with
of local, basically with local vendors, and that should be stressed because
vendors.
Without a decent hotel, you can't have a convention center. It just doesn't happen. They all are tied to major hotels.
And I don't know that we have a major hotel on US 1.
No,
in that area.
Closest thing you have is the Holiday Inn. So the situation
I thought the
is...
Holiday Inn was closing.
Is it?
Yes. It's going to become a assisted living facility, if I'm not mistaken.
Cliff, do you know anything about that? Because you have that shocked look. Did you have an appointment over there or something for an ACLF? Oh, okay, that's all right, Cliff.
Cliff's on a different floor right now.
So basically, because of the size of the Civic Center, they can't bring in large enough groups. Number one, to fill a hotel. Number two, without the hotel, those people who want to come in and have conferences for 2 or 3 or 4 days have no place except out in St. Lucie West or down in Martin County to house any of the people who would be coming in for these conferences.
Right. And
So
if you look
it's
at major,
catch-22.
if you look at major and even minor convention centers across the state, across the country, it's always tied to a hotel.
Sure.
Has to be.
Sure. So if a hotel could be built on there, that wouldn't help the convention center or the civic center because of the size of the area it has to offer to potential users that would come in. And on the flip side, the big ones can't come in because of that. So you've got small ones that are local, like you're talking about with Mike Milady's deal.
Mm-hmm.
And these are local people who are coming in to service local people.
Right.
So we're not getting the outside tourist dollars coming in on these conferences that are in the civic center.
Actually, with Mike's last convention, I believe it was Real Estate Expo. Is it the Real Estate Expo? I could be wrong. Local.
I think it was the Real Estate Expo,
He'll
yeah.
call in if I'm mistaken, I'm sure, or he'll beat me up the next time he sees me. But he did have people calling in and inquiring about spaces all the way from Orlando. Once again, proper networking and proper advertising will make that happen. And it is a great show. Matter of fact, it's the largest show except for the Dr. Oz show, because obviously nobody can beat Dr. Oz. But it happens once a year, and it's not enough, or once or twice a year, and it's just not enough to keep a place like that solvent. You need regular conventions, you need a convention, you need things happening there every week. They have a lot of side rooms. You need the place full. And there's just no way to do that.
Well, I would certainly like to wish Mr. Garfinkel the best of luck on this. One thing in the paper notes here is that according to the terms of the sale, Biscayne Atlantic has 180 days to inspect the property and decide whether or not to walk away. It's interesting that the paper would put it that way.
180 days?
180-day due diligence, basically.
That's a long time.
Well, it is a long time, but this is a very large project, and I'm sure that during that 180 days, if Mr. Garfinkel is worth his weight in salt, he has to be able to negotiate a deal with the county and negotiate a deal with the city so that he's got a piece of property he can potentially work with. And I think if he does that, and maybe if they can find some way to expand the Civic Center and bring some bigger rooms in there, and then drop a hotel on there with some retail and maybe some apartments, there may be a way out of it. But that's a difficult lift.
Well, if Mayor Orvac is listening, he may or may not remember this idea that I gave him. I told him to go out to the Civic Center one night, dig a hole, throw in an arrowhead, fill the hole back in, or two, fill the hole back in, come in about a month later and dig it up, claim it as Indian lands.
Indian lands.
And put a casino there.
Wouldn't a casino be neat?
I think so.
It's casinos create a tremendous amount of jobs.
And you'll want to be voting no on that amendment.
Which is what, 3?
Is it 3? Yes.
Is it?
Yeah,
I think it's 3. Yeah, you want to vote no on the
vote no on
Amendment 3 if you want to have a casino in the city of Port St. Lucie.
Casinos bring in a lot of jobs, a lot of revenue, and
But would that be the perfect location?
For a small casino? Yes, it would.
Yeah, for a small casino, it would be okay. It's a little off the beaten path, being a little ways out from I-95. But we'd have some shuttle service.
How many floors is the parking garage over there?
I think it's 3.
Oh,
3 or 4.
Okay.
Blackjack is on the 2nd floor right now.
Oh, okay. Couple of guys sitting under there shooting dice.
All right, Cliff, would you like to go to a commercial break?
Well, I think you might need something to happen here, like a phone ringing. You see, we could really use a citizen to call in and ask a question or make a comment about the things we're talking about here. That's what this show's for, right?
Absolutely, Cliff.
Issues and answers. Well, you've heard the issues. You want to offer some answers? 340-1590. We're live. 6:45 right now. We'll be right back.
The Florida SBDC at Indian River State College is pleased to host the United States Postal Service at IRSC's Chastain campus in Stuart on Wednesday, October 17th at 5 p.m. The USPS will discuss the advantages of its Every Door direct mail program. Come learn about this affordable targeted advertising technique that lets you map your marketing by zip code, age, medium income, and household size. Don't miss this great seminar and learn how to effectively market to your customer. Join us on Wednesday, October 17th at 5 p.m. at IRSC's Chastain campus in Stuart. Visit www.irscbiz.com. That's IRSCBIZ.com, or call 772-336-6285. That's 336-6285 for more information.
If as a woman you believe that you can accomplish all that a man can accomplish and more without the help of the government, you just might be a Republican. If you believe that you should have a say in your child's education and that you should have a choice as to where your child is educated, you just might be a Republican. To learn more, go to stluciegop.org and click on Being a Republican.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
And now back to Issues and Answers in St. Lucie County with Michael Loeb and Marg Gotz.
Well, thank you, Cliff, and we certainly appreciate your chiding our audience out there.
Well, I'm trying to be easy on them tonight.
Well, you even got one of them to call, so I understand Mark is on a line for us. Can you put him together with us?
He's already here with you. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Mark.
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead and talk to us. We're waiting on you.
All right. The issues of the schools. Parents have to speak up and get involved. And when something stupid's going on, you got to bring it to their attention. This issue with the grading, somebody brought it to their attention. Unfortunately, the school needs the parents to come out and stand up. Say, this is what we want, or this is not what we. I have had a 15-year-old that went up in a parochial school. I moved him to one of our schools, central or public schools, and he came home with a bad grade. And I asked what happened here, and it turns out he got the bad grade because the teacher did not understand cursive writing. So,
Seriously, Mark.
Absolutely.
They don't teach it anymore.
They don't teach it anymore, but more to the point, they didn't accept it and gave him a bad grade just because the teacher couldn't read it.
That's pretty outrageous. That
it is. Yeah, with the principal, and they asked me if they wanted, if they got another teacher to interpret it for that teacher.
Interpret. I love that word.
I was like, no.
Would you like the English interpreted back into English?
Wonder how much extra interpreters are going to cost for each school.
I don't know. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, as a parent, you have to stand up and say, "Look, this doesn't pass the sanity test," and get in there and make changes. So.
Well, cursive writing. I'm glad you brought that up because cursive writing was out of the school systems for probably a generation or so, and it's being pushed back into the schools.
Penmanship.
Well, it's penmanship, but cursive writing is a way so that you can take notes at a speed where you can almost keep up with someone who's talking. Where if you print, which a lot of people do, you can't keep up. So cursive was basically a form of shorthand, but more importantly than that, all of the original documentation for this country was written in cursive.
Correct.
Beautiful handwriting in cursive by our founders.
I want my boy to be able to read the Constitution.
Absolutely. Read the Constitution, Declaration of Independence,
Bill of Rights, Federalist Papers.
All of these different areas.
Grocery list.
But without that, then you've got a generation, and I've been in the Library of Congress, the Jefferson Library up in Washington D.C., and I was having a discussion with one of the ladies there. I guess she was. Someone who was showing everybody where to look for what. And I asked her about that. And she said that basically most of the students that come in there cannot read the Constitution or the original documents that they have in that building.
Unbelievable.
And she said it's been that way for a while, which is very sad. That's a dumbing down of our community. But you're absolutely correct with the parents. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate of charter schools, for the simple reason is that the parent has to make the commitment to put the child in the school and sign an agreement with that school as to what the rules of the road are going to be during that year with that child. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, yes, the parents have to be involved, but let's face it, we've got a school system that's getting over almost $500 million a year to educate our students. They've got to do a better job, and it really is not that difficult if we go back to what we did 50 years ago, which is basically teach reading, writing, reading understanding, and math. Those three items will give you a basis to make a really great living and be an intelligent citizen in our country.
Right. And Mark, if I can add, when you mention that parents need to get up off the couch and do something about it. Going on Facebook is not what we're talking about, okay? Making a stink, posting a few things on Facebook just doesn't cut it.
Nope.
No, they actually have to get there, get into the principal's face, pick up that rule book, wherever that 50% rule is, and just saying, this is ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah, one other place to go, by the way, is the SAC committee. Even though they're pretty controlled by the school, the SAC committee is the Student Advisory Committee, which is usually made up of parents from the students that were in the school. And what school was this again? Westgate?
I believe it was Westgate.
Westgate K-8.
Yes.
I was chair of that SAC for about 5 years when that school first started, and I'm a little shocked. The parents are pretty protective of that school, and I'm wondering if they knew about this rule, even if it's in the handbook.
Oh, yeah, it could definitely be buried in there somewhere. It could be fancied up with all kinds of language. And, in education, once you say something against education, you have 12 or 24 people running out. I have a study that shows, okay, which usually those studies are written by the people that design the curriculum and the education and have already written studies that have, forced the direction of education to the point of failure. And now they have to show studies as to why the failure is not theirs. Okay, the failure is somebody else. The failure is not enough funding. The failure is economic concerns. The failure is, all kinds of things. The failure is who's sitting in the White House.
You always have to have a problem in order to ask for money. And who asks for more money than our school districts? I mean, they're always perpetually up at the state level and at the local levels. They never have enough money. They got a half-cent sales tax on us 7 or 8 years ago, renewed it about 3 years ago on a very quiet situation. And, they were touting 8 years ago, better schools now. Well, we didn't get better schools now. And so consequently, nobody followed the dollars. And that half-cent sales tax is still on there. You'll see that on that tax bill you're looking at.
Yep. As a matter of fact, the school board gets 3 lines on your tax bill. The school discretionary, which is almost $750,000. The school capital improvement, which is 1.5,
right.
And the school required local effort, which is 4.3 mils of your tax bills. Now, those are 2 phrases that I thought I would never utter when talking about St. Lucie schools, and that was improvement and effort, both in the same sentence. And once again, Cliff might want to say that the views expressed on this show that was a PSL.
I already said that. So that covers the whole show.
So we've got the disclaimer.
Yeah.
Mark, anything else while we have him? We certainly appreciate you calling in.
It's time, and I just want to get the word out that there's got to be standards and accountability.
Standards and accountability.
Absolutely
You're a man after our own heart. Thank you very much,
Absolutely,
Mark.
Mark. Thank you so much for calling in this evening.
Gentlemen, have a good night. Thank you.
You too. Be well. Standards and accountability. So what does it take to make our schools better? I mean,
more parents getting involved with parent-teacher associations, things like that?
That would be a help. I mean,
if the parents are there on a regular basis, they know what's going on and have an opportunity to say something or speak up.
Well, and you've also got the situation, and I'll take this into private business, that if you're not successful in what you do, somebody else can come in and take over what you're doing.
Yeah, there's competition, yeah.
Competition is always difficult.
Absolutely. Within a 5-mile radius of where I live, there's probably, I don't know, 60 places where I can get a hamburger. Okay. However, talk about choice in school, and it's, exactly. People start groaning and rumbling and screaming like this. You're killing baby seals.
Well, once again, choice, and a lot of people have choice. There are some good private schools out there. You've got St. James Academy. You've got several of these other Christian schools that are out there that are private schools, besides the charter schools.
There's an alternative.
Yeah, there are a few alternatives over there if you have the dollars. If you don't have the dollars and you need those options, then you see a lot of people from the Fort Pierce area coming down into the charter schools here in St. Lucie, city of Port St. Lucie, I should say, and trying to get their students in, which I think is great. I think that community needs to have its own charter school that would be, for those students, and basically start them early with some classical education. And I think you'd have some wonderful students coming out of there and great citizens in about 12 years.
And it will, actually, in a couple of years, I believe, a year or two. Your second show had Sandy Krischke on here with her
Right.
classical charter school.
Sandy is doing the Independent Classical Academy. It's going to be located on Okeechobee Boulevard, or Okeechobee Road, I should say, out west. It's going to have a agricultural theme, which is required in charter schools. For some reason, they have to have a theme other than good education. But Sandy's going to be doing a classical education school, and if you are fortunate enough to be able to get in there, I think she's starting with K through 6. And like I say, if you're fortunate to get in there, your child will get a great classical education format, which is teacher-led, not student-led. There's so much talk about, well, students should lead their own education. Well, it just doesn't work out well like that. It never has.
Might work for wolves, but it doesn't work for children.
Yes, classical education's only been around for 3,500 years and educated everybody who has become someone in history, in the history of our country. Yet over the last 40 years, we have progressive education who is dumbing down just about everybody. So,
I survived the New York City school system, and in order to try and raise the graduation rate after, a couple years after I left, they found they couldn't do it in my school. Springfield Gardens High School, look it up. They actually had to close the school. That was the only way to improve it, was to close it.
Well, sometimes that's the best thing to do, if you...
Yeah, start from scratch.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The problem is, I don't want to get in. We don't have a lot of time. But with education, you have a double F school. The state is supposed to come in, but it just never seems to happen.
That's because the double F schools are taken over by the existing school districts, and they just reconstitute them with principals and a few other things along those lines. So it's one of those things. There are other options, which are bringing in other operators to take over those schools and operate them, and they're on usually short-term contracts, and it's being done in some areas.
Anyway,
well, I hear the music. Do you hear music? For some reason with these headphones on, I hear music.
That's how we let everybody know that the show is ending.
Oh.
Because I know we could go on all night.
Cliff is leaving.
Yeah, that means I'll be getting out of here.
Cliff wants to go home. Okay,
Cliff wants to go.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Shut this off. Shut this
I want to thank you, and to you parents out there, get into the streets, get into the schools, demand better education.
Make a difference for your child.
Oh, I don't have to shut it off. I can put it on overdrive. Autopilot.
Yeah.
Hey, you've been listening to Issues and Answers in St. Lucie County on WPSL Port St. Lucie. The talk of the Treasure Coast. It's 7 o'clock.